Hey everyone, welcome to the treasure hole, where the treasure is homemade LARP weapons and the hole is my apartment. My name is Martijn, I'm from the Netherlands. I'm a freelance animator, 2D animator. My company is called Variants. We have a YouTube channel, you might have heard about it. I do this as a hobby. I just kind of picked it up last year. I've never LARPed in my life. I have zero LARP experience, which is a weird combination, I guess. So in this video series, I'm going to explain how I make my LARP weapons as cheap as possible. So this video is basically a long shopping list. This is going to be like maybe three-parter, like a series of 3 parts, maybe, something like that. Okay, let's start with cores. Your weapon needs a core, and the core is basically like the rod or the tube or whatever that's inside that gives the weapon sturdiness. Cores can be several materials. First of all, you have fiberglass. Fiberglass is the most common material used for LARP cores. It's lightweight, it's strong, super strong, and it's relatively cheap. It's not that expensive actually. The downsides of fiberglass is it can be hard to acquire. In the Netherlands, there's maybe like a handful of shops that sell it still. Another downside is that it's made of glass, tiny bits of glass. So if you don't handle it with care, you're gonna get tiny little like splinters in your hands, and it's really annoying. So yeah, be careful with that. Wear gloves or don't like rub it in your hands. That's what I did at the shop when I bought my first one. Another material I use a lot is graphite. Now, graphite is used in golf clubs, in ski poles. Are they called poles? I don't know. And those are like walking sticks they use for Nordic walking. You know, I don't know how popular that is like in the US or whatever, but what I do is I go to a local secondhand shop or charity shop or whatever, and there I can buy them for like €3 per piece, which is a really good price for them. When you don't know where to get it, like secondhand or whatever, and you're trying to just buy like from a factory, you're trying to buy graphite tubes or rods, then it's really expensive. Like it's way more expensive than fiberglass. So then in that case, it's not worth it. Obviously, everyone's going to think, why not just use PVC? It's cheap and it's easy to get. PVC is weaker than you might think. Like just if you just want to have a thing that's cheap and want to hit your friends with, go for it. Buy PVC, buy a pool noodle, and you know, knock yourself out. Another material to avoid is metal, any form of metal. Aluminium, steel, copper. Don't use copper, it's way too expensive. But the reason why you don't want to use metal is, first of all, it's often way too heavy and it's dangerous, especially like aluminium. If you break your weapon, it happens sometimes. It's gonna bend or tear, and then you're gonna have like basically a dagger or like, you know, like a spear in your hands. The last material to avoid is wood. Wood is too heavy, too thick, you know, for like slim weapon designs, and is dangerous again, because if you break it, you basically have like a wooden stake that you can stab someone with. So basically, like the options you have is fiberglass and graphite. A bit limited, but you have to start somewhere. I'm sorry, you can't really skimp on this part. You have to get a good core. That's just how it is. Now on to the part where you can skimp on foam. Foam is the hardest part of the search, because you really have to look around in shops, discount shops, supermarkets, hardware shops, hobby shops, obviously. I use yoga mats. I think the ones I buy is 2 meters by 60 centimeters, which is great. So good for big weapon designs. I use it a lot for making the shaft of like an axe or a mace or whatever. I almost always use yoga mats. Another material I use a lot is what I call puzzle mats. They're these like gray mats, roughly 50 by 50 centimeters, I think, that you can kind of like put together as a jigsaw puzzle. The good thing about these mats is that they're very cheap. The biggest downside of these things is that they have a big grip texture, basically. These big like diamond shapes like all over it. You have to sand those all off or cut them off, which takes forever. Lastly, I use craft foam, I think it's just called. Like it's 2 millimeter thick EVA foam. You can buy them at a lot of hobby shops. It's good for like detail work. You know, if you want to put a logo on, or you want to put just an extra layer, you know, extra level of detail. So that's all the foams that I use. But like I said, just look around in shops and see what you can find for a good price. We're gonna put this all together with glue. Now, the type of glue I like to use is contact cement. The way that contact glue works is you apply it to both sides that you want to glue together. You wait about 5 minutes to 10 minutes for it to dry or almost dry, and then you press it together. and you press it firmly together because it's based on pressure basically. And then it doesn't come apart again. Like you have one shot, so you have to be very careful with how you plan this. You also want to use a respirator when using this glue. I almost always forget. That's going to be your main glue for putting all the foam together and stuff. But I also like to use hot glue. It's very, very versatile. You can use it for all kinds of stuff. I usually use it for filling up like gaps or whatever, or to give it just a little bit more, you know, support, just in case, you know. So the last kind of glue I like to use is spray glue, like spray can glue, just hobby glue, you know, nothing special. When the other two glues don't really work out for me, I use the spray glue. So that's glues out of the way. Let's get to painting. For painting, I use a mix of liquid latex and acrylic paints. Whilst acrylic paints are technically latex paints, I believe, on its own they don't really hold up well. They start to crack and start to tear with heavy use. So you mix it with some liquid latex to make it more flexible. It does dry really fast and it smells really bad because liquid latex is basically a mix of rubber latex, of course, water and ammonia. And ammonia smells really bad. So acrylic paints, just buy the cheap stuff. At least that's what I do. I just buy the cheapest shit I can find. You know, I use like acrylic paints that are like 150 per tube. The only paints I do not skimp on is metallic paints because you know, you want to have like a good silver. So that's what I would look around for, a good paint. Don't use acrylic spray paints. And it's very tempting because obviously you'll get like a very even coating, and it's also cheaper. At least silver spray paint is way cheaper than buying silver acrylic paint from an art shop. It will crack and tear and flake off. And don't be like me, don't think like, well, I don't believe what you're saying, because that's what I did. I tried it anyway, and I've made 3 weapons and 2 of those haven't survived. And I've recycled them, and one of them is actually one of these. I think it's this one. This one used to be an axe. Another thing to avoid is apparently metallic paints with actual metal in it. I don't have any experience with this yet, but apparently especially copper will cause something called latex rot. So yeah, so be careful with that. After we're done painting, we're going to use a top coat or a sealant or whatever you want to call it to give the weapon longevity, and for that we're going to use Isoflex. I hate Isoflex. I do not want to work with it, but it's the only thing that I have. The reason I hate it so much is because it's expensive. It has a short shelf life. It's toxic, so you need a respirator or something and a good ventilation in your room. And it's also very hard to get. Probably because it's toxic, has a really short shelf life, and is very expensive. Lastly, we need materials to make a handle. There's many ways to do this, and you should just experiment with it a bit as well. But for the cheap build, we're going to use just twine or string or rope, whatever you can get. You know, the cheap stuff you buy at the supermarket, like you get a ball of string for €1, and then that will last you quite a while. And then on top of that, you put something nice, to, you know, like a nice material for your handle. Just kind of look around, see what you can find. It's kind of part of the fun, looking around for materials. So finally, you need something on top of your top coat. You need something to kind of maintain the weapons with. And one of the things is silicone spray. You buy it in like a spray can, and it's quite cheap. Like I can buy it for a few euros at the local shop. Be careful with spraying it. I recommend doing it outside. I can't because I live in a flat, so I do it inside my apartments. With the downside that my floor is now kind of squeaky. Another thing you can use, I've never used it myself, but you can also use talcum powder, apparently. Just kind of rub it, you know, just kind of, I don't know, just kind of powder it. I don't know. I've never used talcum powder in my life, so yeah, just kind of powder it and you kind of rub it off. It kind of takes away the shine a bit, because Isoflex is very shiny. So that, yeah, onto tools. The most important thing to have is knives, utility knives in this case. I have them in all sorts of sizes and shapes, from like big, thick, like, you know, like snap-off box cutters to tiny X-Acto knifey things. Also, buy a lot of replacement blades. They dull really fast on foam. And don't work with the dull blades because you're going to regret it. You know, you're going to be halfway done with your sword blade part, and then suddenly you start to like tear, and you start to have like, you know, waviness and stuff. Just put a new one in, you know. What I do these days is I sharpen them. I bought some really cheap sharpeners online, and what I do is just kind of like sharpen my blades after every few cuts. It makes them sometimes sharper than they were when you bought them. Also, you want a surface to cut on, unless you want to ruin your table or your floor. Getting a cutting mat is obviously a good solution. Corrugated cardboard works fine as well, although it won't last you as long as a cutting mat will, of course. Or anything else, like linoleum. Maybe you have some like spare linoleum or something, or PVC, whatever. Rulers. I have a lot of rulers. Again, the bigger the better. And also make sure they're made of metal, like aluminium or steel or whatever, because you want to use it to cut along, and obviously you will cut into a plastic one and ruin it over time. So next up is brushes. I like them with soft bristles. Brussels? That's not Brussels. I like to use big, soft bristled brushes, and also very cheap ones. Not just because I'm a cheapskate, but also because sometimes you'll just ruin them because you forgot to rinse them in water, and you left them on your workbench for a while, and then you just, you know, and then once the latex has dried up, they're ruined. Another thing I like to use is just simple sponges, for like just household sponges for cleaning. Obviously not the hard scrubby part, but the soft part. They soak up the paints really well, and they also don't dry out as quickly as brushes do, in my experience. And they're very, very cheap. Again, they're very important. I've also found some sponge brushes, which are like basically wooden sticks with a piece of sponge on top of it. You could probably DIY that really easily, but they were so cheap that I just bought them, and they work really well. So I'm very happy with them as well. I also like to use a Rotary tool, or Dremel, I think it's also called. It's good for like etching, it's good for detail work, it's good for sanding small parts or large parts if you're really good. It requires some practice. I'm way better now than I used to be. I have done a full sword with just a Dremel, so it is possible. It's easy to handle, but also hard to handle at the same time, actually, if you know what I mean. Also, you're going to need something to sand your weapons with. You can just use sandpaper for this. You can just do everything by hand if you want. Sanding it by hand will take forever, so be ready for that if you're going to do it by hand. I personally use a sanding machine. I have a belt sander, but I think anything will work. Any sanding machine will work. If you're going to get a belt sander, I recommend getting one that you can mount on a table, like mine, where you can just kind of put it on a table, put 2 clamps in, and then you have a way, it's way easier to use that way. So I think that's it for essential tools. Now we're going to go to nice to have, but not essential, you know? So first of all, tape. Everyone probably has some form of tape in their house. So you probably don't have to prepare this, but just in case, tape is very useful for a lot of things. I like to use masking tape for a lot of things, like masking. Be very careful with sticking it on your foam or latex paint, because sometimes it just gets stuck and I have to rip it off and then ruin either the foam or the latex paint I've applied, which is very unfortunate. Another nice investment is a soldering iron or a wood burner. These are very nice for adding details to your weapons, like etching runes in them, or adding little trims, or battle damage, that kind of stuff, you know, carving details into your weapons. Very useful for that. It's dangerous stuff because it gets really hot, so be careful with them. I have yet to buy a power tool that I have not hurt myself with, unfortunately. Also, a heat gun is very useful for multiple things. One of them is speeding up the drying process, if you want to live risky like that. Actually, you're probably just better off using a hairdryer for that anyway. Also, it can be used to shape things. So like, say you have a circle of foam, and you want to make it to more of a spherical shape. What you can do is just kind of like heat it up with your heat gun, and then shape it around something round. Like I use a sift, I think, or something. Over time, I've also saved up a lot of bottle caps and tubes and other cylinders to use to cut through foam. You can put it on the foam and then kind of like twist it, and just keep going and keep twisting and keep like, and you will cut through the foam basically. I also use a lot of baking parchment. It's really good stuff because it doesn't stick to anything. It doesn't stick to the latex, it doesn't stick to the glues we use, and it doesn't stick to the Isoflex either. So it's really useful for many ways. So how are you going to get all these materials? It depends on where you live, of course. I don't know what kind of shops you have around you. You know, I know what I did. I go around a lot of discount shops. but also like Aldi or Lidl or whatever supermarket that have like their own like discount aisle, you know, where all the non-food, I guess, stuff is. You know, they sell very cheap power tools. They sometimes sell like cheap paints and that kind of stuff. I also love secondhand shops and charity shops a lot. I have one really close to my work that I visit weekly almost. You can also look online, obviously, because it's 2019 and a website exists. If you live in America, that's very nice because then you have Amazon. We don't have Amazon here, so I have to either deal with local shops or buy my shit in China, which is what I usually do. Websites like Alibaba, AliExpress, Wish, whatever, you know, they're gold mines. You can buy so much stuff there. I've bought all kinds of things, tools, materials, and it costs nothing, you know. And it's bad. I know it's bad for the economy, it's bad for the country, and but I just really want to make cheap weapons. So, lastly, and finally, ask around. I've learned a lot from talking to hobby shops and other people that have similar hobbies. It's always just good to talk to people about this stuff. And some of them are very eager to share their experiences and their, like, you know, their knowledge, like I am doing right now, I guess. So that's about it, I think. Yeah, I kind of want to finish on. Don't overdo it, you know, just take it easy. Don't spend like hundreds and hundreds of euros on a hobby that you don't even know if you're gonna like for long. You know, don't be that person that has 2 guitar lessons and then buys like a Gibson, like my dad. Sorry, Dad. You know, just kind of start off small, work from bottom to the top, you know, just take on small projects first and only invest when you feel you're hindered by the tools and materials you have. That's what I do. Like, I don't buy tools that I want. I buy the tools that I need, that I feel like now I'm ready to take the next step, basically, and have fun. That's all. It's all about having fun. You know, if you're not enjoying it, I don't know, find a different hobby. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll read all the comments because there's probably not going to be that many. Anyway, see you next time. Bye.